There, wait, this content, this meeting has been being sent to a third party. All right.
Okay. I think
I,
by the time you see that, you're already live on YouTube. So let's just say hi to
Yeah.
YouTube now.
howdy, YouTube.
And howdy to Joey and Melanie. So it is very nice to see you guys today and talk about Disney and go to our
Yeah.
happy place a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, while you do some technical things too, I can catch you guys up on something fun that the wife and I did last month. Spur of
Good.
the moment. She was feeling frustrated. Last year was a very busy year for the law practice, and she was it was actually her most prosperous year in over 20 years of practicing law, and she just was burnt out. And we had wanted to go on a cruise over New Year's and just couldn't make it work, so we just did a kind of a last minute trip to DC. And but it's you go to DC, it's a lot of walking, it's free museums, it's just exhausting. And so she just wanted the getaway vacation where you lounge in the sun and read a book and have your drink and just do nothing. No agenda, nothing. And so about the last week of February, she shoots me an email and it's data on a cruise out of Galveston. And she's like, read this email and come to the office immediately. We have something to discuss. And so I get to the office and I'm like, yeah, this, if you want to do this, let's go. It was just like a I don't know. I think it was a 5 day. It might have been a 7 day out of Galveston down to Mexico and Belize and Honduras. And she's like, okay, I'm pulling the trigger. And I mean, it was like 2 weeks until it was like the last cabin on the boat. And
Oh,
it was through Vacations to Go. She had been thinking of a cruise and she gets this email from Vacations to Go out of the blue that's like, hey, last minute deals. So we call a travel agent. He's like, yeah, that ship is booked. You can't get on it. And she's like, oh, darn. He goes, well, we got cruises leaving from all over the place. She goes, we don't want to fly anywhere. We just want to go to Galveston. So he sets up an alert. And this is like a Monday night. And he's like, all right, so Galveston, cruise 7 days. It had to be these days because she had looked at her calendar. She got the email, looked at her calendar, and miracle of miracles, she didn't have a meeting. She didn't have a deposition. She didn't have court. She didn't have, mediation. Oh, I already think I already said that. And she didn't have deposition. She didn't have anything. So she's like, okay,
Wow.
it has to be these like within this 9 day window, and we don't want to fly anywhere. And so the next day she goes in the office, there's an email from this travel agent, but it's leaving out of Fort Lauderdale. And she remembered that we had gotten some Southwest credit over the holidays. And so she looks it up and it's like, oh, you just enough to get a ticket from Austin to Fort Lauderdale and back. And so she's like, book it. We hadn't even
That's
booked the cruise
happening.
yet. She bought the
oh,
plane tickets. She calls the travel agent. Is that boat still available? And he's like, yeah, I put a 24-hour hold on it just in
Nice.
case you guys might want to do it. And so she's like, book it. Let's go. It was a Princess cruise on their newest ship, the Sun Princess. We just recorded a podcast episode for our Go Places Do Things, and so we're excited about that. But it was this was our third cruise. And if you'd asked my wife prior to this cruise, are you cruise people? You're going on your third cruise? She'd have been like, no way. Cruises are great, but they're for the ultra elite, super wealthy. The boat rocks. I get, motion sick. I'm not a cruise person. Yeah, she was wanting to book the next cruise before she didn't even want to get off the boat. I had to drag her with the luggage off the boat when we got back to Fort Lauderdale. So, and spoiler alert, we have already booked a cruise for later this. So, so two in this year alone, we've already done one, knocked it out. So I would say it's safe to say that my wife is now a cruise person, and she's very excited about the cruising life. You know that we've hit our 50s and we're getting into that whole thing. And Madison is going to
Mhm.
graduate high school next year. We're just kind of like, okay, what's the next phase look like? That is it. So very excited to announce that
that's cool.
we are now cruise people.
And
I didn't know
travel
that was a
people.
thing. Cruise people. Okay.
Like, I mean, it's a thing. Yeah, we have friends. Good friends that we know from church that cruise 3, 4 times a year. They're Royal Caribbean, like ultra elite platinum, and you know, they so they talk about cruising all the time, and just the sweetest couple, and we love them to death. And so yeah, and they're definitely cruise people. So now when we told them we were cruise people, they got all excited. They're like, you have to come on. So we've done
Oh
Carnival,
yeah.
we did Disney on a 3 day. We did this the Princess on a 7 day. Now we're gonna do a Royal Caribbean at the end of the year. We're gonna do Virgin next, and then we're gonna do a Norwegian, then we're gonna do a Viking cruise. We're gonna keep doing all of them because
You can
I want to
compare
know
them all.
I want to know what the best ones are, right? I know kind of have the ones I've been on. I know what they're like, so I want to know what all the rest are like.
Oh, I
But I will
love
tell
it.
you, Princess, I mean, Princess ruined us. That was such a great cruise. If you'd have asked me beforehand, I've been like, Princess, that's a love boat. They've been around forever. That's like, if I, if I want to be Dick Van Patten and, go on a cruise in the 1982, sure, but that's not cruising. That's old school. This was every bit as good as the Disney ship that we went on and about half the price.
Wow. What
Yeah, and
what
no
made
kid.
it
Well, few kids, very few kids.
what made it so great? What was the outstanding thing?
Service was great. The food was amazing. It was super clean. The ship was incredible. It's, like I said, it's the newest ship, so
Mm,
you never felt it move.
mm,
It
nice.
it just was a. I can tell you all about more about it later. Like we're here to talk about other stuff today, but while you were busy doing other things, I just wanted to distract you with that. But yeah, no, it was, it just checked all the boxes on
Hmm.
if I was to go, knowing what I know about cruising, which is very little, and if somebody said, "Well, what would be like your ideal dream scenario?" This was very close to it. It was 9 out of 10 on, everything that I would want to in a cruise. So yeah, it was pretty great.
That's awesome. And I love your spontaneity.
Yeah.
That's the thing that you're going to figure out that as you become empty nesters, you can have a lot more freedom to just make the call. You get the email from the cruise line that's like, "Hey, this cruise is 50% off right now if you can come, this certain week." And you
Yeah.
you might realize, "Oh, we actually could do that." So
Yeah.
that's how it starts.
That's how they got us. Yeah. So if you're not a cruise person, definitely look at some of the larger ships because I mean, it's essentially a 20-story building the size of a city block that floats
Right.
around the Caribbean. And we went to the Dominican Republic and we went to Puerto Rico. We stopped at Princess Key, which is their private island, their private beach. It's on the island of Eleuthera, but you can't, I mean, they've got gates and fences, so you don't know that. You just think that you're on the private island. And so,
Right.
yeah.
That's awesome.
And I like the spontaneity too, but I'm still the kind of guy who would prefer to book something 6 months or a year out in advance just because I'm the kind of guy who wants to know what we're going to do. And if I'm going to have a down day, I want to have had that planned, to know that I'm having a down day. And if I'm going to do stuff on a day, I want to know that I've got that planned and secured.
Right.
But it was fun, it was just kind of, and we really didn't plan. We did a excursion, hardly did any research on it. When we went to Puerto Rico, I kind of did a little research around some historical sites in Old San Juan, and the boat gets parked right there. And so we just got off and did a little, probably 3 or 4 miles of just walking around Old San Juan, taking pictures and looking at some of the historical stuff, and then got back on the ship. So
Excellent. All right. Well, Rick's here, so now we can start.
excellent.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, Rick. So what are we
Oh,
talking
that's
about, Sue?
funny. I'm logged into my YouTube as my other account right now, but I do believe this is definitely broadcasting on the Go Inform page, but my comments are on my other account.
Because your Zoom is logged in on the Go Inform page,
Yeah,
but your
I don't.
YouTube.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Anyway, what are we talking about today? Joey, you get to do more talking because we are talking about your very interesting time that you had as a cast member at Disneyland. And I think Melanie might be just as jealous as me about this.
I don't know
Yes.
about that. I mean, yeah, maybe when you were 20 something, right?
Well, I don't think I would want to
No,
do,
I would like to do it now.
yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know if I would do the exact job you had today,
yeah.
but I definitely would love to be a Disney cast member.
Well, before we get started, if you could be a Disney cast member, what job would you apply for that would be like this? If I had to pick out of all of them, this is the job I'd want. What would you pick, Sue?
I would be one of those ladies at the front gate that lets everybody in.
Uh, you mean at the turnstile
Yeah, the
or oh,
turnstile. I'd be the turnstile
you'd stand
lady.
there for 8 hours and just
Well,
scan
they
people
have
in?
no, they're little ladies. But they have stools and stuff.
Yeah.
I just want to be there right when people get there and
That's
let
people's
them into
happiest
the
moment,
park.
right?
It is.
Yeah.
So that, and I only want to work the first shift of the day
Yeah.
when everybody is fresh and super excited. That's when I want, that's my job I want.
How about you, Melanie?
Well, when I was younger, probably working on any ride.
Mm.
But like if it was now, I
Wearing
think it would
some
be
cute
cool to be like
Matterhorn
a
outfit, pushing a
photographer.
button. You'd want to be a photographer?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Taking the photos of the moments, you're in front of the castle or even, yeah, I mean, I guess they do the photos like closer, but then they also do the ones that are, like kind of right after you come in and then you see in the down Main Street, you see the castle. Um, yeah, but I would do anything. I mean, I even see these people working in the shops. I'm like, I mean, I probably would not enjoy that as much, but you
Well, if you're
still,
doing a photographer gig, you just remember you're standing outside in the heat,
yeah, yeah,
or
but
if,
I mean, I've lived in Texas my whole life.
or
I'm
if it's
like,
You're
forecasted to
ready.
rain all day, they
I,
might call
I,
you and tell you not to
and
come
I,
in.
I was a lifeguard, so
Hmm,
uh, yeah, I think I could find a way to handle it if I got that opportunity. But yeah.
that's awesome.
What
So,
about you,
Joey,
Joey? What
yeah.
if it was now? What?
If it was now and not what we're about to talk about, I
Yeah.
want to drive either the bus or the fire engine up and down Main Street in the mornings when they open up the park. That would be
Oh
like
yeah.
the best job ever.
Yeah.
It'd be such a cool
Yeah.
job.
Get the little hat, just sit there
Yep.
and bomb around Main Street, like up and back and forth all day long. Just
And you'd be in the shade. Well,
if I was in the
yeah.
bus, yeah, I'd be
If
in the
you're on the
shade.
bus, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool. Well, Joey, why don't you tell us what it was you did do in the parks and tell us a little bit about when this was and what part of your life, we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah. So back in mid 90s, I graduated high school in 93, started college, and made it 2 years and at junior college, and was really just not loving school and was not loving any retail jobs I had. I was doing photography actually as a freelancer and was using a camera shooting 35 millimeter film, which was very expensive and very time consuming. You back then you take pictures. I'd do a photo shoot and I'd send the film off because it was
Mhm.
cheaper to send it off and have it come back 2 weeks later than it was to go to the 1 hour photo mount, which we had several of them in town, but I was trying to save a buck and actually, treat it like a business. And so, I found myself in a ton of different jobs. I was working at a payroll distribution company just in their mailroom, folding checks, stuffing envelopes, and for 8 hours a day. I hated that. I worked at a florist shop. I worked at a Sam Goody's music store. They used to sell albums and cassettes and CD. Back when albums were going out, CDs were kind of the hottest thing, cassettes were the hottest thing, and CDs were just beginning, and everybody was questioning whether that was the thing. That was all kind of converging at the same time. While I was working at the flower shop and working at a portrait studio and doing all these things, I was 22 and thought this was 1997. I was thinking, why don't I just go do the thing I would want to do for a year if I didn't have any obligations. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have rent. I was living at my mom and dad's. I didn't have anything. All I had was I didn't have a car payment. I had a car, but I didn't have a payment. Insurance. I didn't have a cell phone because that wasn't like a thing that 20-year-old kids had
Yeah,
back then.
no.
And so I thought I would love to go to work at Disneyland. And it was 100 miles from where I lived. So I knew I could
Wow.
drive there. If I could get the job, I could probably move up to Anaheim. And so I jumped in my car. I raced up there in early January, right after New Year's in 1997. And I went, and they have a big building on the in the back lot that's the casting office, and that's what they call it because you're a cast member. And I remember I was just geeked out because they had a people mover cars were out there, like you can go sit in them, and they had one of the rocket jets from the Astro Orbiter thingy was out there for like the classic one because I don't know why, but they had them out there, and you can like take pictures with them. Just just some kind of Disneyfy the whole thing. And anyway, I went in, and they had a board that had jobs, and this was 97. So if I remember correctly, like cast member jobs for attractions was like $4.15 an hour.
Right.
You can work in the kitchens for $5.10 an hour. You can work in merchandise for $4.85. There were very low paying jobs, and I'm like, even at $80 an hour, $80 at 40 hours a week at $8 an hour, I could probably barely squeak by an apartment and gas and insurance and that kind of stuff. And so,
Mhm.
but I looked at the board, and graveyard custodial, third shift, midnight to 8 a.m. was $9.15 an hour.
Wow.
And so you were supposed to, when you filled out the application, there was three lines for the preferred jobs, and I had made that the top one. And then I did merchandise and attractions. I was like, if I don't get that, I'll get these. And if I work part-time, I can still live at home with my folks and come to work at Disneyland. That's no big deal. I just make a day of it, right? I just come up a couple hours early, do the thing, drive home, and it would just be fun. It would be fun money. I could say I work at Disneyland, check that box, and be done with it. My plan from day one was I'm only going to do this for a year, and then I'm going to get serious and grow up and be a man and go live like the real life serious, get the real job or start the real business, get married, have kids, have a life, buy a home, all that stuff.
Right.
But at 22, I'm thinking, I got to do this now because if I don't do this now, I'm going to be a 35-year-old going, gee, I never did anything fun, and went and did the whole serious thing. And it was like the cruise thing. It was a window of opportunity where, again, no obligations, so it was perfect. I could just go do it, and if it failed, if I went and applied and didn't get the job, it was no big deal. So I went and applied that day. They get the application. They're like, okay, wait, here's somebody will call your name. Somebody called my name. I went to an interview where it was like a panel interview. There was like, if I remember correctly, there were like five of us being interviewed by two or three people that worked at Disney, and they throw out silly questions, like if you were a Disney character, who would you be? Well, if you know, just this typical, like we're gonna weed them out general questions, right? Like
Mhm.
I think they were really looking for character, like personality more than anything. And I was a dumb 22-year-old. I couldn't even spell personality. So I just said, I answered honestly. I mean, I've given hundreds of interviews for companies I've worked for as the interviewer. And so I know what they're looking for now. I didn't have a clue back then. And anyway, so long story short, they pat me on the back and said, thanks for coming in, and we'll let you know. They said, if you don't hear from us in 6 weeks, you can feel free to apply again. I remembered hearing that. And so I thought, okay, 6 weeks, but 6 weeks went by and I hadn't heard anything.
Oh.
So to the day, I drove back up. I went to the casting office. I filled out the application, and custodial jobs were still available. And I handed in my application, and the lady that takes the application looks at me, looks at the application, looks back at me, looks back at the application, and says, hang on a second. And she goes away, and she comes back with the blonde. There was a blonde woman and a man that had interviewed me 6 weeks prior. The woman comes back and says, why are you here? And I look at her in the face and I said, because you told me if I didn't hear anything, I should come back in 6 weeks and apply again. She goes, I said 6 weeks because our policy is 6 months. I said, I remember very clearly you looking at the group of people saying it. As I sat there at that panel interview, you said, if you don't hear anything, come back in 6 weeks and apply again. And that's why I'm here. 6 weeks to the day. And this was like 9 a.m. I was there the minute they unlocked the door and let people in to apply. I'd gotten up at like 6 o'clock and drove up to Disneyland.
Mhm.
She says, have a seat, hang on. And she comes back a while later, 30, 40, 50 minutes later, an hour later, she comes back, and felt like I'd sat there for eternity. And she says, somebody from custodial wants to interview you. Are you still interested in that role? I said, yeah. So she takes me back. It was cool because they open the door and you kind of go back into the inner guts of the place, and there's, cool Disney art hanging on the walls. The place is real brightly colored. It's got Disney-fied carpet with little hidden Mickeys in it, and I'm just eating it all up. I go into this room, and I know this is kind of a long story, and we got a lot of other things to talk about, but I love this story. So we go in this room, and there's this giant of a man. Hang on a second, I hit the unmute button on the YouTube, and I heard myself talking to myself. There's this giant of a man sitting behind what looks like a miniature desk. It's not, it's a normal sized desk, but he is huge. Like his knees are coming up to here. Like he's just sitting in this chair. And he's a thin man. He's not a large, oversized man. He's just probably 19 feet tall. I'm exaggerating. He's probably like 6'8", 6'7" feet tall, and you can tell he's exhausted because he just worked he's graveyard custodial manager, one
Okay.
of a handful that run the overnight custodial department. And it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. He's got crusty eyes. You can tell the guy's just been up all night long. And he's like my age, like I am now. He's like 50 something, and he's sitting there looking at me, and he's so, you want to work in this? Yeah. And what makes you want to do this? I'm a big fan of the man, and I'm always coming to Disneyland growing up, and thinking how cool it would be to work behind the scenes, and I have no issues with getting dirty. And he leans forward in the chair and he says, "If I ask you to jump in a dumpster and spend all night cleaning it out, are you going to give me any trouble?" I went, "No, sir, not at all. I'd be happy to." And he goes, "Great. You can start in 2 weeks," or whatever. Gives me a date, stamps the thing, signs the thing, and I'm off to the races. And they hand
That's
me
awesome.
a binder. Read this, come back. Your date is such and such. And I went to Disney University, and here I am with all of these. Trying to picture, I've been hired for custodial. I'm basically a walking rash of a human being. I'm like disgusting. Like I'm dressed nice. I'm just like I am today. I had a button-up shirt. I had nice slacks on, nice shoes. I'm there like everyone else, but I could tell without even knowing what role I've been hired for, like the types of people that they hired. All of these out of work actors who
Oh,
are just so
right.
beautiful and so, immaculately clean and perfect white teeth and beautifully brushed hair. They're all around me, like they're all the popular kids, and I'm standing around like, "Hi everybody, I'm Goofy Joe here to clean your toilets." And so we sit in a big theater, and they kind of give us the history of the park, which, obviously a lot of people there knew. I definitely knew. And then they take us out in groups. They walk us around the park. We got a whole day of it. And then, so that was like
Oh,
orientation. Like they do that for everybody, whether you're, in food or, in maintenance or, in attractions, whatever. It doesn't matter. If you're working in the parking lot, that's what you do. But then they break you out. Then it's like, okay, well, then you're going to go meet with your particular, managers in your department for the next 2 weeks for training. And my management met at midnight and worked until 8 in the morning. So here I was, like in a trailer on the back lot with three other guys who had all been hired for custodial graveyard, watching training videos in a room. They turn out the lights
in the middle of the night.
of the night. I think the idea was whoever could stay awake through the videos. And they're like OSHA training videos too. They're not like Disney-fied videos. It's
Oh
like some guy
no.
standing in front of a chalkboard. And today we're going to learn about the dependencies on chemical agents for cleaning, asphalt off of metal. I don't know, whatever. And it's so boring, and it's bad music. They were produced in like the 70s and 80s, and we're all doing trying to, trying to stay awake and watch them. Anyway, so got through that. That was a week of that, and then a second week of, they kind of assign you a person doing a different job. And they had guys that were hosing down the parks every night to wash all the soda stains and popcorn in the drains. There were guys that would go through all the queue lines and clean out the trash in there, and then vacuum and mop the queue lines. So like, I worked with a guy during my training that did all we did all night was the Space Mountain queue line, the entrance and the exit at the one at Disneyland. And so, and this guy, so this was 97. This guy had been there for 10 years, so he got hired in the 80s, right out of high school. Like he graduated high school and he went and applied to Disneyland. And he had a boombox like John Cusack has in Say Something, right? And he's got a like a zip up canvas bag full of 80s rock band CDs, and he just cranks out the 80s rock tunes all night long. He had a mullet. He was like right out of the 1987. And he'd been there 10 years. That's all he'd done. So we did the queue line, and there was time left over, so we had to do Tomorrowland bathrooms. And I remember going into the bathrooms, and he's a real chatty guy, and he'd be talking about what we're doing on the job. He was just real friendly. We go into the ladies' room. He stops me. He goes, "Ladies' rooms are just the most disgusting. Like the men's are bad. Guys don't know how to aim, but the ladies' rooms are just disgusting." And we walk in, and he's kicking open the stall doors, and he's wiping down the toilets. And he comes out of one stall, and he goes, "Come here, come here." And I walk over, and he walks up to the toilet seat, and there's a clump of hair, wet hair on the toilet seat. He bends over and picks it up. He looks at me and laughs and throws it up into the ceiling, and it sticks to the ceiling. And he just laughs maniacally. Some
God.
woman's clump of wet hair is stuck to the ceiling, and he's just laughing. I mean, crazy. This is the kind of people I ended up working with for a year, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so I got more stories about that first week, but so that night while we were cleaning the Space Mountain in that whole area of Tomorrowland, when they park the sleds every night in like a separate room, and then they bring them out, put them on the track, and they send them off without anybody on them. And since I was about 10 years old, all I ever wanted to do was go get be the rope drop and run faster than everyone else and get to Space Mountain and be down that ramp first and be the very first person to climb on board the ride. That would have been like one of my deepest. If you would ask 12-year-old Joey your deepest five bucket list items, like one, two, or three at any given time would have been first in line on Space Mountain, first thing in the morning, first ride of the day. That's what I want. So they take us into Space Mountain. We go down to where they load, and they're just sending off empty sled after empty sled after empty sled. Well, they're coming back around now, so they know they've got a full complement on the attraction. And there's me and all the guys that I'm training with in our little blue outfits, in our costumes, and they just look at us and go, "Climb on board." So we hopped in, and the lights were still on in the attraction because they have cameras and stuff, and they want to see that if something goes wrong, they have to know what went wrong. So, but fortunately, they all went through just fine, empty.
Mm-hmm.
What was your question, sir?
You guys were the crash test dummies.
We were the crash test dummies.
Yeah.
So they sent us through, and first time in my life, I rode Space Mountain with all the lights on, and then we come back around into the station, and the cast member that was there for the attraction looks at us and goes, "You guys want to go again?" So without getting out, they just fired us off back, but then they turned off the light, turned on all the effects, so we got to ride it twice. First of the day, first ride of the day. So yeah, I checked that one off, and what's
cool.
about to in the next 15 minutes, half an hour, as we talk about things, you're going to hear a lot of things I had in me that I thought would be so cool if I ever got to do, that I actually got to do in the 13 months that I worked at Disneyland. It was really very, very cool and exciting. So we want to like I got a little list we can just kind of read off and go down through.
Yeah, give us some more highlights.
Okay, so I'm going to stick to the fun stuff. I've got some other interesting factual things that are not as fun, so I'm just going to kind of skip over that. So I spent the first 6 months to 2 weeks just bouncing around everywhere. I was cleaning toilets, at one night in Adventureland, and the next night I would be vacuuming the stores on Main Street. Then the next night I'd be off in Fantasyland cleaning Peter Pan. I was kind of like the filler that they would stick in the holes, right? They were probably 150 guys that worked in the park every night. There was a team lead for each land, and like Bear Country and New Orleans was one land because there wasn't a whole lot between the two. They made up a Fantasyland or a Tomorrowland. There was Main Street was its own land. And so there were team leads, and you would be assigned to a team lead. You'd go, and the team lead would have a clipboard with all the different jobs, and he would know who was out that night because, you're working 5 nights a week. So there's a guy who like literally every night went and cleaned Dumbo and polished the brass, vacuumed the vehicle, that you sat in, cleaned out the queue line. Like that was that guy's job. But if that guy was not there that night, then he would usually assign you like another one of the newer guys, and you would go do the guy who did it every night. You'd go do his job. So I was kind of bounced around all over the place. And just some of the ones that I did that were really interesting was the Peter Pan ride. They gave me a vacuum cleaner that you wear like a backpack, and it has a big hose that comes over and a long wand with a
Like
head at the end of it. And what's that?
Like Ghostbusters.
Yes, like Ghostbusters. It's exactly what you look like. And they said, okay, go vacuum the queue line, which is really small on Peter Pan. And they said, then climb into the attraction and just go through. And Peter Pan, you're hanging from the ceiling, so there's all these effects on the ground. And they're like, just go through, and because you got to get the dust off. You can't just not clean Peter Pan for 6 months. It's just going to be caked in dust everywhere.
Right.
So like you just go through and you just vacuum any flat surface to get the dust off of this. And then they give you a rag, stick this in your pocket. And if you come across like a shelf or something, go ahead and just wipe it off and knock the dust off. And then clean it up, go through when you get through the whole attraction, come and find me. That was basically like that's the job description. And so I get in there, and you may remember Peter Pan and certain show elements. So I'm in there and I go through the kids' room, and then I'm kind of out the outside their room in the courtyard where you see like the dog's house, and then you go around I go through another door, and there's another room that has London from like 20,000 feet, and the clouds that are on the ground. So there's little lights on the ground that are cars or whatever, or carriages that are supposed to run along like the streets, but then there's clouds above them. Those clouds are garbage bags. And so there's crumpled up, the transparent, kind of milky garbage bags that you buy at the store and at the grocery store. They're just two or three of them in there. So I'm having to vacuum around those without sucking them up in the vacuum cleaner. And so I just pick them up and move them like I'm an Imagineer. I'm setting the
So
people are going to ride this
crazy.
ride later today. Go look at those clouds. I did that. I'm the one who made the clouds. So I go through the whole thing. I get to the room with Skull Island, and this is where it gets really interesting. Not only is it a large room with this big island in the middle of it, where you're coming to Neverland, and there's 3D lights kind of hanging in the air, and they don't hang down from the ceiling because you're hanging down from the ceiling. They actually come up from the ground, and there's like these little half dome balls that have wires coming out of them, like I don't know, like a dozen or two wires coming out of them. They have fiber optics inside the black wire, the metal wire, and at the tip of the wire the fiber optic is exposed, and they're all eyeball height. And so I'm going through this thing, and it's just a sea of metal wires wiggling and bouncing off of me and my vacuum, trying to stab my eyes out for like 20 minutes while I'm trying to make my way through this room and vacuum up the dust so I don't
Oh
get
my
my
God.
eyeballs gouged out. It was pretty terrifying. So I get through there, I do the rest of the attraction, and then I go find the guy, and it was fun. The guy who ran Fantasyland his name is Walt, so that was kind of fun. So I'd be like, hey, I'm looking for Walt because I gotta clean something. That was always fun. One of the jobs I had, they have a crew that just uses pressure washers. They have several trucks that tow in pressure washers on trailers, and then they hook them up to a hose, and the pressure washers are huge. They're like as big as a Volkswagen car, and they heat the water up. The hose sends in tap water, and it heats it up to like 200 degrees, and then pressurizes it to 200 pounds per square inch. And so they give you this pressure washer, and you go up and down Main Street or whatever land that they are designated to clean that night, and you just spend 8 hours doing what they call popping gum, because there's gum everywhere. And it's on the ground, and and you get you've seen it, these
Yeah.
little discolored circles
Oh,
that
yeah.
they're all uniform sized, and they're usually kind of, the ground could be red, it could be blue if it's in Tomorrowland, but there's all these little brown or
Yeah,
gray,
yuck.
it's
Yeah.
gum that people have, then the people walk on it, and it's just everywhere. And so you just go back and forth like an inch at a time, back and
Oh,
forth,
it
and you
sounds so
pop it. You have to
tedious.
get the pressure gun just right, and they call it popping. You pop the gum, and the water pushes it to the drain, and it goes off into Orange County somewhere and out to the Pacific Ocean. But here's the best part about popping gum. When you pop the gum underneath the gray brown yuckiness on top is still pink and candy like, and the smell of sugar and the gum
Oh,
smell,
what?
just thinking about it now. I mean, it's like walking into a candy store. It's just so like all night long you're in this. You're like, I'm angry. I'm at work and I'm soaking wet, and because you have like galoshes on because water's just going everywhere.
Yeah.
Your pants are soaked, and it's hot. You're sweating because it's 200-degree water, and you're miserable because you're bent over doing this all night long.
Yes.
But it smells fantastic, and so it's like a drug. So there's guys that's literally their job. They're on the pressure washing team, and they just spend
Oh
five,
my
6 nights a
gosh.
week going around Disneyland, just popping gum.
Wow.
And anything else that might stick to the ground, they just go around and they use the pressure washers to get. Then they clean.
So, that's why Main Street smells like a candy store.
Yeah.
Actually, Main Street smells like a candy store on purpose. They have smellitizers, and you know that.
Yes.
In fact, they use
Well,
that on all the rides. Guardians of the Galaxy even uses it. Definitely Spaceship Earth uses it. A lot of the rides use smellitizers, and so, but yeah, Main Street uses that. They have certain smells, like I think it's vanilla, some kind of smell that comes out on the crystal shop that makes you turn your head and look at the crystal because you
Hmm.
smell it and look. The candy store, the fudge store, obviously they have smells that make you turn and then make your mouth water, make you want to go in and actually buy a
Right.
cookie or a lollipop or something. So anyway, so I did all these jobs, toilets. One night I was the hose guy on Main Street, and they sent me to the hub. So I start at the hub, and I start in the center of the hub, and I just go in circles, pushing the debris that the hose will push down toward the drains, and then I did the big circle all the way, like just kind of do a big loop, and then I start moving down Main Street, and another guy coming up from Town Square meets me halfway, and we high five, and then the sun starts coming up, and our night's over. That's why when you go to Disneyland, the ground's always wet because there's
Mhm.
this whole crew of guys that just men and women that just go descend with fire hoses, just pushing all of the soda and popcorn. Kitchens. One of the jobs I had several nights was cleaning the kitchen. Sometimes I would be on my own, which meant the kitchens were full of mats. So the first thing you do is you go pull all the mats, these
Mm.
like 3/4 inch, 1 inch thick, heavy duty rubber mats. You pull them all out. And they're about as big as a desk. They're probably 3 feet by 4 feet. You go drag them out to like some back alleyway. And if you're doing it by yourself, you go and stack them up and come back to them later. Then you go in and you clean the kitchen floor, which is covered with grease and French fries and
Yeah.
tater tots and all kinds of disgusting things. And you sweep all that up. Then you either use a hose, or you would, some kitchens you couldn't use a hose in, you'd fill a garbage bucket up with soapy water, dump it over, then
Oh,
use a
wow.
broom to push the soapy water toward the drain, and then you'd get another bucket of water, another trash, literally a trash can, like a 20-gallon trash can, and dump fresh water down and use that to push the soapy water down the drain. So dumb.
Jeez.
And then you'd head out to the back, which smelled like garbage, smelled like a city dump, because behind all the restaurants and all the shops, they have these massive trash cans, these compactors, where all the trash goes. So standing right next to that, you use another hose with a spray nozzle on it, and some soap, and you soap the mat, and you spray the mat clean, then you move the mat to a dry pallet, and then you spin the next mat,
Oh
and
my
you rinse
gosh.
the mat, you move the mat, and you soap the mat, you rinse the mat, you move, and you do this like 60 times with these mats that weigh 25 pounds piece. And then you take all the mats in a rolling dolly, and you take them all back in, and you lay them all back down. Hopefully the kitchen is dry by then, hopefully the mats are dry by then. If not, you got to dry everything, because then the kitchen crew starts showing up, and they start making tater tots and french fries and everything, corn dogs and chicken legs, everything they're going to make for the day. And so you would usually get like a restaurant, because it would take all night to do these
Oh, I
restaurants.
bet.
So that was a big job. I'm trying to think if there's anything. I mean, I did tons of queue lines for rides and vacuum. I did the Indiana Jones adventure one night, and they warned me, like, the part where it gets really steep with the balls coming down, there's hydraulic fluid all over the place. So you basically get to that point, and you sit down and slide down, because if if you're on your feet, you're gonna fall on your
Oh
butt,
my
because
gosh,
it's really
really?
slippery there. And so yeah. Anyway, so we did that, and so one night I get to work, and they have an office there. It's behind Big Thunder. It's kind of between Big Thunder and the castle. There's a backstage area that they have a custodial office. They did 25, 30 years ago when I worked there. And so I would go, and it was like a trailer. So I'd walk in, and there'd be a desk there with a person who works in custodial graveyard, and it was the custodial office. So just at night, there was a person there that literally sat there all night long. And they were kind of the one, if I didn't know where I was gonna go, they would tell me, oh, you're Joey. Oh, you're gonna go. And my outfit had my costume had my name on it. So, and by the 2 weeks on the job, pretty much everybody knew who I was, because it's always the same people, right? And so this guy's telling me where to go and what to do. And one night he says, they need you over on the Mark Twain. Great. I hadn't done that yet. So I head over then the boat crew, and I say this, anybody who actually knows, and very few people I imagine know this, the boat crew is a unique, not unique in personality wise. We're definitely unique in personality. When Disneyland opened, Walt had an affinity for the Mark Twain and the Jungle Cruise, and certainly as the park grew in '59 when they included the submarines, the Storybook Canal boats was part of that, and obviously the Columbia sailing ship and the
Mhm.
canoes, the Mike Finn keel boats, anything that was really not on I mean, it might have been on a track, but it free floated. Walt had a particular love for. It was like a water version of the trains, and you know how Walt feels about
Mhm.
trains. So he
Mhm.
loved the Mark Twain, and he loved the Jungle Boat cruise boats. Jungle Cruise boats. Blah. And so he made a separate department within Graveyard Custodial just to care for the boats, and they called it the boat crew. In fact, when I started working there in '97, just prior to my hiring, there was a guy who left who had started working at Disneyland in 1955 and
Wow.
42 years later retired and had for 42 years been the captain of Walt's boat crew, the
Oh my
graveyard
gosh.
custodial guys. And he ran a ridiculously tight shift and ship and crew. So I get there and these guys, they're kind of like the Navy SEAL version of custodial. And I'm not kidding. I
Ooh.
go there, they meet right outside this office. And so I go down and I meet them. I had met a couple of them before. So I was like, I guess I'm working with you guys tonight. And they're like, great. And so they had a guy, they're unionized, and they had a guy who twisted his ankle and had been out of work for, I don't know, 18 months or something like that because he was playing the game, right? Working the system. In fact, in the year that I worked there, he was on the boat crew. And I only worked with him like 2 nights the whole year that I worked there because he came back, he twisted his ankle again, and he was out again.
Oh
I
no.
think they actually did let him go like uh, a month after I left. They found some loophole that allowed them to fire him because he hadn't worked a day in like
Oh my
3 years
gosh.
or something like that, or two. He had worked like a week in 3 years. Anyway, so I was kind of doing his job. And so, because he wasn't there. And so they were always getting these, like, they would get the leftovers of the new guys. There was always a different one every night to do this guy's job. And they were a great group of guys, the hardest working group of guys I ever worked with. Here I am, 22 years old. And they're like, and one of them's like, come with us. We're going to the Mark Twain. We're going to show you what we do. So picture the Mark Twain. We get over to the Mark Twain. It's a 3-story boat. It's pretty big. And they're like, we're going to clean it top to bottom. We're going to sweep it every inch of it top to bottom. Then we're going to mop it every inch of it top to bottom. Then we're going to go and detail all the brass. By the way, there's over 90 pieces of brass on this boat, top to bottom. Everything everything a guest sees, everything a guest experience. Oh, and by the way, they were doing Phantasmic at this time, and Phantasmic would put pyrotechnic gunpowder all over the boat. So we have to go hit all of the corners and details because if that stays, it rots the wood that it's sitting on, and we'll have to have facilities come in and replace it, which means the boat will probably have to go down. We can't let that happen. So, so this guy and I, we go over to the Golden Horseshoe. We each fill up 2 um, mop buckets full of piping hot water. We head over to the Mark Twain. We go all the way to the 3rd floor, carrying 2 full 5-gallon mop buckets of water each. Then we go down, we get our brooms, we get push brooms and little sweeper brooms, and we go up to the top floor. And he just starts going. I mean, he just goes 50 miles an hour. So I just match him because I don't know any different, right? They don't teach you how to do this stuff. You just see somebody do it and you do what they do. So I'm going along sweet. I know I'm missing 50% of the dirt. I don't care. I'm just gonna try and I'm gonna match this guy's pace. I come to find out later, this guy actually had he's still a friend of mine. I follow him on Instagram and Facebook. We chat every now and then. The last time I went to Disneyland, I went and had coffee with him. Super amazing guy who at the time was trying to get into the police academy. Just hardest working guy in the world. And he ended up staying at Disneyland and just retired just a few years ago, last year, I think.
That's
So
cool.
anyway, and he didn't stay in custodial. He went off to guest services and totally rocked guest services for many, many years and did security and a bunch of different things at Disneyland. Anyway, so we sweep the first deck, we sweep the steps, we sweep the second deck. These all have names. I can't remember the Texas deck and then this deck and that deck. They all have names. We sweep the stairs down to the bottom. We sweep the bottom deck. Um, push everything off. Then we have to clean out the house where the little paddock area where they queue people. We clean that whole area out with a hose, just like the guys that clean out the rest of the area with hoses. We get our own hose, clean that out. Then we go up to the top, grab our mop buckets, mop every inch of the thing, top to bottom, steps included. Get all the way to the bottom, and it's lunchtime. It's spent 4 hours cleaning this whole thing. We go
Jeez.
off to lunch. We connect over our love for Disney geekism. Go back to the boat. He hands me a rag and some polish, and we start cleaning off the brass. He's taking care of all the pyrotechnic stuff. Next thing I know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and we're done. I think at one point we slipped off to go hit all 11 of the Jungle Cruise boats like in an hour or two, and then came back and finished the Mark Twain. And he was like, "Yeah, good job." High fives me. go home, whatever, go to sleep. The next day I come back and they're like, the boat crew wants you on their team. So you're now officially on the boat crew.
Oh, good job.
So that's where I
Oh,
was for the next 9 months or 10 months or whatever it was that I
oh
worked at Disneyland.
wow.
I would show up, I'd go to the boat crew, and my main job was cleaning the Mark Twain. Like that's where I was graded probably 50, 60% of the time. And that included running over to the Jungle Cruise on occasion to clean those off. And if we knew that the Columbia was going to be run like during that summer, I would usually do half the Mark Twain, then run over and help a guy do the Columbia because it was a big job doing the whole thing, and then run over to Jungle Cruise and then back to the Mark Twain. Sometimes if the guy that was responsible for the subs was out, I'd go do the subs. And so they taught me how to do that. You vacuum them all out, you wipe them all down, you clean them all up. Then you do the outs when the sun's coming up. You're standing on the lagoon polishing off the diesel fuel that has kind of collected on the edge of the submarine while the sun is hitting the Matterhorn. It's really one of my favorite
Oh
memories
my
is being there as the
gosh.
sun is lighting the sky, and then all of a sudden this big bright light hits the top of the Matterhorn as the sun is rising, and that's where the shadow of the Earth is kind of breaking. It's pretty cool. All right,
Hmm.
so it's already two. So let me, or 12 o'clock in your terms, Sue. So let me give you a breakdown. I got a list here of some really cool things I got to do other than just the job. So I made friends with Walt, the guy who ran Fantasyland at night, and the word got out I was a Uber nerd, loved Disney, and one of my dreams was because I started telling people, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Wouldn't it be cool if we went there and did that? Was to go to the top of Matterhorn. So one day he said, "Don't go to lunch. Meet me at the base of the Matterhorn." And we went up all the way to the very top, popped out the top, stood there and looked around for 15, 20 minutes, and got to say I got to
Wow.
I poked my head out the top of
That's
Matterhorn. That was pretty
cool.
cool. Yes, there's a basketball court. Yes, it's a locker room. Yes, there's an elevator, there's stairs and a ladder. You got to go all the way up.
Oh,
This it's like a seven
geez.
or eight story. I mean, it's a 90 to 100 story, I mean, foot building. So
Yeah.
it's a bit of a climb. Then you come back down, take the elevator down to the bottom, and you're out. So that was really cool getting to do that. One night I was working on the Columbia, and they just stuck me over there. Said just we everything else is covered. Just cover the get the Columbia good and clean and ready to go. That had a lot of brass on it too, and it was one of those where you did the whole top deck, swabbed it like a sailor, you mopped it and everything. Then you went down underneath and you had to do all the detailing of all of the show elements underneath. I don't know if you guys have ever been inside the Columbia, but
Uh-uh.
there's like a where all the crew sleeps. There's the cabins quarters, and they all have like the doors have uh like rods and rails on them so you can look in and kind of see
Oh,
inside. It was very
wow.
cool. You'd look at it and go, Walt did this. Because it wasn't really, it's not really designed like an Imagineer would design an ideal attraction. It's way too many things that could break. If the boat tips, you could fall and something can skewer yourself. But it was a very cool place to be. I got stuck in there one night during El Nino. We had this horrible rain and every inch of me was soaked, and so I just took my shoes and my socks off and hung them on a show light. Just went back to working barefoot. And when I came back, my socks were dry, which was awesome. And I was able to walk out of there with dry socks that day. But while I was working on the Columbia one night, a group of guys that I worked with, one of them worked over at cleaning the Country Bears. Another one was my buddy Colin, who I'd been gotten really close with working on the boat crew. Just a couple of guys. They came to get me at break time, and they're like, instead of going to lunch, let's go in the Haunted Mansions. It'd been down for refurbishment for like 6 weeks. It was not like a full on. They didn't do the Nightmare Before Christmas thing back then. So it was just down for refurb. They were like fixing like two animatronics, and so the whole thing was down because they had their tools out and everything. But all the lights were off and all the animatronics were off and everything was off and nobody was in the building. So but because you work midnight to 8 a.m., you have stuff. You have your Batman utility belt. We all had flashlights. So we went and I've told you about this before, Sue, and I'm pretty sure I told you, Melanie. The four of us went and did a walking tour of the Haunted Mansion
In the
with
dark.
flashlights in the dark, just by flashlight alone. And at one point, so I'm walking down the hallway with the floating candelabra, which is just stuck there, stationary because everything's off. And there's a screen in front of it. So if people throw things at it, it hits the screen and falls. It doesn't hit the candelabra and ruin the effect,
Mhm.
right? Really smart of the Imagineers to do that. But I look over to my left, there's a door. So I'm down at the end of the hallway. I'm not going to go back down the hallway. The guys are all at the end of the hallway where the attraction goes by, where the doom buggies are having a conversation about I don't know what. But I decided to walk through that doorway, and I walk out and there's a catwalk on the other end with like a, I don't know, 20-foot drop. It's like a two-story building right on the other end down into nothing. But there's like emergency lights on. I'm in a backstage area for the ride, but I'm still in the building. and I look over to my right, and there's a door that takes you to the other side of that screen, so I can walk right up to the
Oh,
candelabra and
wow.
look at it. So I walk over to that door, and as I go through that door, the other guys had followed me down the hallway, and they came through the door to the catwalk. So I stepped through the door and shut it behind me, and I'm all alone in that hallway on the other side of the screen, face to face with the candelabra, and all I have is a flashlight. It's like it was such a Scooby Doo moment, and I'm like, guys, where are you? I can hear him laughing on the other side of the door. I think they probably planned it somehow. I don't know, but it was pretty funny. Anyway, they came in, we had a good time. Anyway, we walked through the whole ride. That was really pretty incredible. One night I was over, you guys might remember the Indian Village before they put in Galaxy's Edge.
Mm.
Um, uh, I was over behind Big Thunder, the Big Thunder Ranch, if you remember having that, and we found a trail in the dark by flashlight and went walking down over this little hill and came down the other side face to face with an Indian chief. Whoa, so we walked around the little Indian village that you could only see from the train or the Mark Twain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we walked around that little Indian village and walked and saw the little animatronics. They weren't moving. It was the middle of the night. That was pretty cool. Um, let's see, what is some other pretty great. I slept at Disneyland a couple of places. On the Mark Twain, there's a captain's quarters, like a captain's cabin, and with a little bed in there. It's kind of small. You have to kind of bend your knees. But I slept on that. I slept on the the Columbia. I slept in like a storage locker over by Storybook. That was another one of the boats I had to clean regularly. We had to not only do you clean all the Storybook boats out, which have all kinds of like natural debris, like tree leaves and stuff, but you have to like wipe them off because the paint is it gets fingerprints and stuff gets
Mm.
soiled real easy. So you kind of like polish it with Pledge. You have to polish every boat so that it glimmers and shines and looks brand new every morning. The Jungle Cruise. Cleaning the Jungle Cruise in the dark is interesting. I had an encounter with a family possum one night, a mom and like four baby possum hanging by their tails on one of the boats. That was great. That's a legit jungle back there, by the way. And there were spiders as big as my hand. And so I would be sweeping along, and there would be like a leaf, and I knock the leaf over, and a spider would, crawl
Oh
across the
my
bench. Of course, I'd bail out of the boat and go find another one to clean. Sometimes they would build massive webs very quickly. When park closes down and gets dark, those spiders would descend out of the trees onto those boats and build
Oh
massive
my
webs. So
God.
when you would get on the boat, the first thing you do is walk around like this with the end of the broomstick, making sure you take out all the spider webs. One night when I was working early on, when I was new, I had to go clean all of the parking lot trams, and I heard some really loud, deep booming sounds. And the guy I was working with was like, "Oh yeah, they do that every 6 months to scare the birds off out of the jungle because they'll gather in the jungle." And then it's just packed full of these Southern California crows. And we hear a couple more of these booms. They were firing cannons with like live fire or something up into the trees, and all of a sudden the sky got dark because so many birds came out of the Jungle Cruise, and he's like, "You better get on the tram." So we got on the tram, and birds were crapping all over the whole parking lot was full of bird crap. I was glad that guy had seen that before because he warned me, and we got on the tram,
Oh
and
my God.
all the birds just headed south over the parking lot, which is crazy. I can't imagine they do that now because it would just completely destroy California Adventure. They announced California Adventure while I was working there. As you know, it opened in 2001. In 1997, that summer, they brought us all into the Lincoln Theater. Um, it was a guy named Pressler. Paul Pressler was the president of the company of theme park division of the company at that time. Eisner was the CEO, and Paul Pressler came in and he had a whole uh, PowerPoint presentation from the Imagineering team of all of the California Adventure. Like, well, this is what we're going to, they didn't even tell the public yet. It was, we're calling it California Adventure, and it's going to have, Condor Flats and a Hollywood land, and it's going to have a great big lake with a Ferris wheel. And so they did the whole thing, and it was kind of cool. And we got super excited, and they gave us, like goodie bags and things to take away. I told you guys that I was going to have photos, but, in 1997, I didn't take a camera to work, and if I took a camera to
No.
Disneyland, a lot of those pictures are 35 millimeter. They're either in boxes somewhere, I don't know, or they're probably gone at this point after nearly 30 years. So I don't have really any images. I do have a few, like little, like my name badge and stuff. I went looking for it through some boxes of things we still have in storage because it's not something I have just out, and
Yeah.
I couldn't exactly find those pretty quickly. But one of the Imagineers who built the Indiana Jones adventure gave me a tour, walking tour one night. Instead of taking my lunch break, we did that.
Wow.
see, Stone Top Matterhorn, Haunted Mansion. Um, there were two Country Bear theaters. I didn't realize that. A buddy of mine asked me to meet him over there one night, and I was looking all over him in the theater. And I went to leave, and he was like calling to me, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I went looking for you. I didn't see you." He goes, "I was in the other theater," and he takes me back and shows me. You open up a door, sure enough, full theater, stage, the seats, moose. And he goes, we walk down about 50 feet. He opens up another door and full stage
Ah,
seats, moose. They had two that way they could run because it was like a 15-20 minute show. They can run them
Right.
simultaneously on super busy days. I had no idea. So
yeah.
that was kind of fun. Um, I got injured working on the submarines one night. So they told you, they told me when I was cleaning them that if you need to move a submarine, you stand on the rope that's mooring it to the dock, and as the rope kind of goes down under your foot, the sub will move. Like the rope will, as it compresses, it will move the boat. Well, I forgot that because it'd been like, I don't know, 9 months, a year since I'd learned that. So I reached down and grabbed the rope and pulled as hard as I could and gave myself a hernia.
Oh, jeez.
But because I had spent the whole day before that shift and the whole day after that shift bringing friends to Disneyland and running around the park and going swing dancing that night when there was a live band, I
Uh-oh.
could not get workers' comp because me and my big stupid 22-year-old, 23-year-old mouth went and ruined it. And fortunately, it wasn't a disaster. I didn't need surgery or anything like that. And I did heal after I was like out of work for 2 weeks and I finally got better. But yeah, that was pretty rough.
Wow.
They say if you work there that if especially if you're on the boat crew that you're not officially on the crew until you go in the water. Like everybody at some point, you're tired, you're working in the dark, you're gonna slip or misstep, and kerplunk, you're gonna go right on into something. And I'd seen several coworkers go in and need to like go home and get a change of clothes and stuff. One night I was working on the submarines and I misstepped on the dock. I didn't go all the way in. I went up to like my waist on, and I had one leg on the dock, so I was only one leg in, but they considered that good enough. So, but if you're gonna go in anywhere, the Jungle Cruise is definitely the cleanest. I the Jungle Cruise, sorry, the submarines. The submarines is the cleanest water. That's where you want to go in.
Yeah.
You don't want to go in
Yeah, the
anywhere else.
Jungle Cruise. No, I wouldn't think
No.
so.
There are so the Jungle Cruise captains actually have a history that when they leave the company, like on their last day, they'll jump in. Disney hates it when they do that because they don't want anybody to get hurt, but it's
Yeah.
like a tradition and
Oh,
Mm.
they
funny.
try to do that. One night the monorail was down and it'd been doing refurbishments, and they called the graveyard custodial early in the morning because the sun was already coming up, but the park hadn't opened yet, and there was debris on the track, and so they asked us to clean it. And I was over by the submarines when they did this, so we went up and we were looking at, and two of my friends and I just jumped across the platform onto the monorail track and got to walk out and pick up that piece of trash on there. So that
Oh
was
my
kind of fun. Um,
gosh.
the 1998 Tomorrowland was unveiled that summer that I worked there, and so they had a cast party. I got to go do several things. Got to Space Mountain with no lights on at all, or show elements at all, or sound, just completely pitch
Whoa.
black and silent. Space Mountain was pretty cool. We got to watch Star Tours from outside the cabin as it went through its show routine. That was really cool.
Oh,
Got to ride the
cool.
rocket rods, which was cool. I also did that a couple of other times before they shut that down. So that was really neat to get to go. Most of the time while I was at Disneyland as a cast member, much of Tomorrowland was a construction site, and I have lots of great stories
Mm.
about the Red Rockets Pizza Port or Pizza Planet, or I think it was called Red Rockets Pizza Port, the pizza place. Um, Used to be the Mission to Mars attraction, and we went in there one night. It was a break room, like the corralling area for the first guests that would come into the attraction was now a break room. But then you'd kind of go around a wall, and there was this the queue line had all these audio animatronic like scientists in lab coats behind a pane of glass, and so they were all still there, just frozen in space. Some of them had their faces removed. Some of them had like an arm missing. It was crazy. And then we could go into the little room. A very Scooby-Doo moment again. Got to go into the room where the attraction. They had several rooms that were where the theaters where they would run the attraction, and we'd go in there and like the panels were hanging off the walls with wires hanging out of them. It was very cool. So I wish I had picked. That's the thing I wish I'd taken a camera and gotten pictures of because that stuff was very cool. But just have 3x5s from my mind. Um, Let's see, Star Tours, Circle Vision, got to see the very last Circle Vision showing before they shut that theater down.
Mm.
And then also I got to watch technically the last the very last electrical parade. But of course, it came back like 3 years later at Walt Disney World. But they're like, the last ever. It's never coming back. Get your
Yeah.
buy your light bulb souvenir. You know. But that was kind of fun to watch that, and I still have an affinity for it, and still watched it. I think the last time I went to Disney World, love it, or maybe it was the time before that. Anyway, um, the Carousel Progress, which later became Interventions, it was in a transitional period because, like I said, all of Tomorrowland was in construction, and so they had sawdust all over in there. And the Disney brass were going to have like an event for some exclusive people, and they wanted us to clean it up. So I went in there, and it was that whole second floor of the not the carousel part, but the upstairs part. If you've ever been to Interventions, you know they have an upstairs area that's now had when they opened it a bunch of different display areas for different technologies, and it was just completely an empty shell, just with covered with sawdust. So I spent a whole night in there just with a broom, just a push broom, just pushing sawdust and trying to pick it up and put it in the trash can. But the whole night I was in there, the rocket rods were going zing, zing, like every 3 or 4 minutes they go zipping by. So that was because they were testing it out every night. So that was kind of fun, a little distracting, but also really fun. Circle Vision, riding the rocket rods. There's two Disney. There were two Disney dining establishments that were cast member only. One was called the In Between, which was behind Carnation Cafe or whatever that is over on the east side of Main Street at the end by the hub. They have the same kitchen. So when I would clean the kitchen for the Carnation Cafe, I was also cleaning the kitchen for the In Between, which was running overnight because it was feeding cast members. They also had a 50 style diner underneath Pirates of the like 3 stories underneath the Blue Bayou.
Really?
Yeah, and it was called the West Side Diner. It was a really cool place to eat, but I didn't eat there very often because I wasn't always over on that side. And my friends usually went. They had food trucks that would park behind Space Mountain, and they had the best food at the best price anywhere, and that's usually where we would go. Um, California Wind, cleaning Peter Pan, popping gum. I'm getting to the end of my list here. Family of Possums on the Jungle Cruise. Oh, you guys might remember the Mike Fink keel boats. Do you remember the Mike Fink keel boats? Either of you?
I do not.
Okay,
I don't
so
think
they
so.
had, if you remember Davy Crockett and the River Pirates or something like that, there was this character named Mike Fink from American History who had these smallish boats. They're probably about as long as the canoes, but they were way wider and they could fit, 50, 60 people on them. And they would go around the rivers of America. They weren't on a rail, and they were powered, so they had a little motor on it, and it had a little like the rafts, and it had a little steering mechanism on the back, and the cast member would take cruising around. And they overloaded them one summer, the summer of 97, or either summer of 97 or very early 98. They There was actually a pregnant woman on board. It was 2 stories, so there was an upper deck and an
Oh,
inside deck.
jeez.
And it coming around the bend at one point, they overpowered it and it rolled over and capsized with all these guests on board. And so I show
Oh,
up for work because that was one of the things I had to clean. The kill boats were part of my routine. And they were like, yeah, kill boats have been taken out and they're not coming back. So that was
No more
that. But go
keyboards.
look them up on YouTube. They were pretty cool. I mean, there was a reason why
Okay.
they were popular, but they also were just a death threat. So like they really were not. They were pretty dangerous. Oh, I didn't talk about this at all. Light Magic was a 1 year. It was supposed to replace the Electric Parade. When the Electric Parade ended, Light Magic came out that summer, and it was supposed to replace it. And it was supposed to run for 50 years or something. It ran one summer, and I thought it was amazing. So essentially, the idea is, I don't remember if it was Mickey Mouse or Winnie the Pooh. One of the characters falls asleep, dreams about fairies with lights running around in the forest. And they had built these massive floats that were, I don't know, 40, 50 feet long. They were like the size of large RVs, covered with Disney magic. Melanie's looking it up. Go look up if you can find a YouTube video on Light Magic. It was spectacular. And they would have, I mean, and one of the reasons I loved it, I was 22 years old, and it was each float had like 20 beautiful women, women dressed as a fairy in a little skirt running around on the thing with a wand that had lit up at the end, and she's dishing out the magic to everyone. And the music was great. It was a really cool, and they had built lights that did these the most incredible things and smoke machines on Main Street, and they built this whole rig out by Small World. It wasn't a traditional parade. It was a stage show on a parade float that would stop and do the show at two
Okay.
different locations, and then it would repeat that again later in the night as it headed to the back lot. It was really pretty innovative, and I wish it had been more popular because I thought it was pretty. And they mixed in Disney characters, all the popular Disney characters running around with the fairies doing the thing. But night after night after night for weeks and weeks and weeks, they rehearsed this overnight. So as I'm walking to lunch, I'm watching them rehearse the show. I'm meeting the people that are in the entertainment department, that are the cast members that are working on the thing, and I just really loved it. And then of course the show came out, and the best part of the show was at the end of the show. They shot off cannons of confetti over Main Street and over Fantasyland.
Oh,
10,000 pounds of
Oh
confetti, and
no.
the little leafy confetti, of course, naturally floated into all the shops. So guess what Joey had to do night after night during a lot of the rehearsals before, because they didn't want people to know the show, what, like, any
Right.
secrets about the show. So the first couple of months that I worked there, several nights I wore one of those backpacks and just went all the way up. And it took all night to go all the way up just one side of Main
Oh my
Street,
God.
shop after shop
mm,
after shop, just finding confetti. Evacuating.
oh,
I did.
man.
But that was fun. And then, yeah, I could get friends into the park. So my friends would drive up early in the morning and I'd meet me when I get off, and I'd take them in and we'd run around Disneyland all day long, and they'd leave and I'd go back to work, and I wouldn't get any sleep for like 2 or 3 days. It was crazy.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
Yeah,
Christmas was
when you're
amazing.
22.
Somewhere around October, they bring in this gigantic tree and put it in the back lot, and there's cranes around it, and these beautiful 50, 60-year-old grandmotherly looking women. Sorry, I know this, I don't know, that they're back
Yeah.
there like Mrs. Claus. This is like how they would dress when they come to work, and they would decorate it night after night after night, because it would take weeks to decorate the tree. And then one night, that right after, Thanksgiving or whatever, or right after Halloween, I don't remember exactly when it was. I think it was right after Halloween, actually, back then. They just picked it up with a rolling crane, and it rolled it down Main Street at a mile an hour and plucked it right down at Town Square. It's really incredible. Watching the fire, I got to work one night on it was New Year's Eve. I knew to stay away from the park because everybody said it was going to be crazy. And parked in the back lot. I'm walking in, and I'm right by the Roman candles that shoot off all the fireworks. The New Year's Eve fireworks are about to begin. And there's a buddy of mine back there, and he's got his back up against a wall, and he's kind of pressing himself into it. And he looks at me and he goes, "You're gonna want to get out of the way." So I go up by him and I press myself against the wall, and poof, 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 the sky just lights up. These things fire. This thing's 20 feet from us. It's just firing off.
Oh
It's
my
huge. They're as big as cantaloupe and watermelon. These firework,
Mm.
uh, you know, shells are shooting off, and when they blow, the the fireworks come out, right? All the fire, the black powder and the color and everything, all this, the spectacularness of the whole thing. But that cardboard shell, which probably weighs 5 pounds itself, comes falling out of the sky. So they're hitting all around us, and that's why he'd seen this before. So he was like, "You're not going to want to get hit in the head by one of those." There's a reason why when it's really windy, they don't do this, because those get blown over I-5. And so, and
Oh,
again, they come down on cars and smash windshields. And so, watching these things fall out of the sky, and of course, 4th of July show, it goes on for 20 minutes. So we're just
Right.
pinned to the wall watching it. But it was pretty
yeah.
great.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, I guess the one bonus memory I have isn't actually from when I worked there, but after I left, I kept getting an annual pass, and going back a bunch, and I'd go see my friends that I met from when I worked there. And one day I was there, and I decided to sit down. When you're a pass holder or a cast member, now I wouldn't spend 20 minutes sitting and waiting for a parade, right? I'd walk up on it and just watch it standing there. But back then I would wait 3 hours for a parade if I wanted to get a good spot sitting on the curb. And so I sat on the curb, and there was this older gentleman, and he and I struck up a conversation over his camera. He had this really beautiful camera, and he was taking pictures, and you could tell he was there with his grandkids. They would run up and then say something to him, and he'd smile and say something sweet, and they'd run off again to go ride some ride. And he was just holding a spot for them for the parade. And we got to talking, and he was one of these super rich retired guys who had a Club 33 membership. And I was like, "Oh, I'd love to do that someday. I'd love to be rich enough to have one of those." He goes, "When do you want to go?" And so got me and a friend park passes for the day and admission to Club 33.
Oh, wow.
And so we went to Disneyland and had lunch, and it was a great memory. And it's something I don't know if I'll ever get to. I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford to have another type of Club 33 membership. But yeah, it was pretty special. And so it was a really good memory.
That's really cool.
Yeah. What a nice thing for him to do.
Yeah,
That's some pixie dust.
absolutely. Yeah.
Man, what a cool year that was for you.
Yeah, and like I said, that's not even everything. I mean, do you guys have any questions? I didn't even stop for 1 second. I just wanted to get blasted
Yeah,
through it.
you were on a roll.
Well, I was just thinking, there must have been some times when it was a little creepy to be in, especially in those rides, like in the Peter Pan ride where there's no one else, but there's these figures in there. Like, did you have moments where you felt like there was ghosts or anything like that?
You know what? That's not on my list, but it's interesting that you asked that. So there's a saying that Walt still inhabits,
Hangs
the
out.
park. Yeah. And one night I was using a push broom on the Mark Twain. Like I said, that's where I spent more than 50% of my time while I was there. And it was dark because the lights on there are not real bright. And I could have swore as my head was down and I was pushing dirt that a figure was walking toward me. Of course, I looked up and there wasn't anybody there. But yeah,
Wow.
I mean, there were. It's interesting and things like that is I would then try to figure out how to, like I went and got a boombox myself because I saw that guy that had the boombox, and I went and got swing. I was really into swing dancing. I was taking lessons. I was going out every Friday, Saturday night, going dancing back then because that was kind of the, swingers and
Oh,
swing
right.
kids was out. It was like kind of a, all these bands were doing it, and so it was easy to find. But I put swing music on and I played as loud as I could because I thought it's going to keep whatever scary thing out there might be coming around, and so. I don't know if how well that worked, but yeah, no, there were a couple of places. The creepy, like the Indian encampment was creepy because it was pitch black. Obviously, the Haunted Mansion was creepy because at one moment where I found myself all alone in the hallway, sneaking around some of those places, yeah, you kind of get a little chill in your spine, and you're just kind of
Mhm.
like, I think I want to turn around now. I don't know if I want to be doing
Mhm.
this. One point, Tomorrowland was under construction, and I'd gone behind a construction wall, and the concrete had been lifted up, and it was just dirt back there. And I was just walking along, and this dark figure I didn't know had been watching me just goes, "What are you doing over there?"
Oh,
And it was my boss. I was like, "Oh, it's my lunchtime. I'm just kind of looking around to see what's going on over here." And he's like, "It's fine." He goes, "I
yeah.
was over here looking too because I think it's neat." I was like, "I think it's neat too," but it sure I almost crapped my pants. I was so scared from it. So it gave me a fright.
Yeah.
I mean, you
So
work
when you
nights.
so
What's
when
that,
you
Melanie?
were inside the Haunted Mansion, did you guys walk like the track, like where the doom buggies
No.
are, or did you just kind of go around back behind things or
Yeah. So like we started out where you load I mean, we kind of went in and got where you load at downstairs. So you had to go down a flight of stairs, and we went through a door, which put us in the hallway with the pictures that change. And then we got to the end, and we could go to the statues that look at you as you walk by. I got really close and saw how all that
Oh,
effect worked.
cool.
Went over where the
Mhm.
doom buggies were, where it started walking up to where some of the first, that's where you kind of walk through the hallways, and you see the hallway with the candelabra, and then you round a corner and there's the ballroom scene. And we found stairs and went down and went actually out into the ballroom and could see how
Oh,
the Pepperidge ghost effect worked.
that's what I wanted to know. Yeah, if you got
Oh
to go
yeah,
in
we
the
got
ballroom.
really
Okay.
close to a lot of that stuff, and so I mean, we didn't touch or disturb any of it, but we could, like,
Yeah,
as close as I am to this mic boom, I could get right up and
yeah.
look in their face and
Wow,
see that
that's so
stuff. And I
amazing.
saw things I didn't even ever see on the ride because when you're zipping by it so fast, you miss
Yeah.
things. And so, yeah, I saw things. And so now I know, like, I never noticed the skulls coming out of the organ when he's playing music
Oh,
on the organ.
right.
Oh, yeah.
There's like these skulls kind of manifest and float up out of it. And I was like, well, I never saw that before. And now every time I ride the ride, I don't miss it because I know it's there. And so
Yeah.
just little, because I'm always looking back at the room before you leave the room on the ride, and so I'm missing details at the end of it.
Hmm.
We
Mhm.
walked through the graveyard, we walked through the attic, We walked through, all the, yeah, we just went through all the different show places that you can walk to. We primarily stayed to the track, but places like the ballroom, yeah, we went down there and like walked around inside it, checked it out. It was really cool.
This is so cool.
What was really funny, so the night I got the tour of the Indiana Jones adventure. There's like in the inside the skull that where you kind of drop down behind, the skull that's looking out over the main room. There's a hole in the ceiling, and which nobody ever looks. You're not looking up, going, oh, there's a hole up there. I mean, it looks like
Oh,
part of it's like a crack in a skull. It just looks like a bunch of rocks with a,
yeah.
and he said that when they were working on it, sometimes they would go up there with water balloons and drop them down on the guys that were working on the attraction. Their coworkers, just so they could go up there and like drop water balloons on them. And it falls like 40 feet or something from there.
Jeez.
It's a long
Yeah.
drop, but he just thought that was so funny to share that with me. So he was kind of dropping little things you normally would never hear from somebody that worked on the rides. And
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it was fun.
Such great stories.
No kidding.
Couple of
Awesome
things I
memory.
didn't ever do. Obviously, I never went to Club 33 while I worked there. Totally could have, because that was somebody's job to go up there and clean the
Oh,
restaurant, like where
right.
the guests go. And I'd seen the stairs up to it in the back, but I was just like, no, that's hollowed ground. I'm not going to go there. And I also knew the guy on Main Street whose job was to clean Walt's apartment. And so every
Oh,
night
wow.
he would go up there and make sure that all the dust was off everything. So if anybody came by a dignitary that was getting a private tour or anything like that, it was always clean and everything was, in order. And so I always thought it would be really cool to do that. Now I did eventually do that on a tour, but I never did that while I worked there. It was one of those. That was another one of those. Yeah, I'm not going to tempt it even by asking. Things like the Matterhorn, getting to go to the top of that. I didn't mind asking. There was another guy who was kind of like me, who was always going out of his way to find like the really obscure history about things that were still available to find that the general public couldn't have access to. One night he showed me in the Crystal Palace. There's bench seats along one of the walls with, like little two tops and four tops, but like the people against the wall would sit on a bench. You've seen those at cafes and
Mhm.
things. And we went in there and he lifted the seat was not fastened to the base, and he lifted it up and there was a different patterned carpet underneath the bench. And he said when they changed out the carpet, the original carpet is still underneath the bench. They just cut around it without taking the whole bench out because it had a full base, right? The 2x4 went all the way to the floor or whatever, the sheep wood, whatever, went all the way to the floor. And so they just cut around that and put in the new carpet. So the original 1956 carpet or 55 carpet or whatever it is in the restaurant is still underneath the bench, and it's pristine because nobody ever walked on it or anything. So it's just like it was
Right.
when they first put it in. So
Oh,
that
that's
was pretty
cool.
cool. I
Wow.
mean, little things like that were
Time
all over the
capsule.
park.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And if I'd have stayed another 10 years, I probably would have 10 times as many interesting things.
Easily.
One other thing that's not on the list I keep forgetting about is this thing called Minnie's Moonlight Madness, which is I don't know if they even do it anymore. They probably do. It's some version of it, but then it was this long running tradition of a cast member scavenger hunt where they would rope you and three of your friends together, and there would be 200 or 300 people, in teams that would show up, and we'd all have team names, and we'd get there. You'd have to take a night off because it was overnight, and then you would do this scavenger hunt in Disneyland after park hours, just
Oh,
with a bunch of other coworkers and cast members. And
Um,
we did that
oh,
one. I did that
wow.
one, the one that happened the year that I worked there. I went and did that with friends, and that was really fun.
That sounds super fun. I would pay to do that. They should bring that back as a
yeah.
tour.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Oh man, thanks, Joey. This has been a very diverting and a fun little. I'm like picturing, what it's like inside those rides when they're empty and quiet and the lights might be on. Like it's just a whole different way to experience the park.
I think I would be too scared.
I know it sounds kind of scary.
But
If you're
maybe
by
if
yourself,
I was with a group and you had a
yeah,
flashlight or that,
yeah.
yeah.
I did a lot of jobs with partner, so
Yeah,
that
I can see
helped.
that.
But yeah, being by myself sometimes, which was fine, would also sometimes, yeah, it could be a little bit of a
Spooky.
downer and a little bit spooky. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why you had a flashlight. And most places were very well lit. You know, like the large spaces when you're walking around between places, that's really what you needed the flashlight for.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
most places you had to go to do your job, they had lights on all night long. And so,
Sure. I guess that's true. That makes sense.
yeah.
Because I have like this recurring nightmare that happens when I go spend a few days in a theme park. I will come home and wake up in the middle, like half wake up in the middle of the night and not know where I am and imagine that I'm in like Pirates of the Caribbean or something. Like I'm just in it. It's dark. Everyone's gone. And what am I doing in here? It's like
Oh,
a dream I have almost. I think it's because the rides are so immersive. It just gets in your head, like, and then you're sleeping and you're like thinking, like, mixing reality with fantasy. But if I had that job, I'm afraid I don't know how I would sleep.
yeah. You'd
Well,
have
if you
dreams
worked
every
overnight, you'd sleep just fine. Trust me.
Yeah, I
I would
guess
sleep
that's
like 13
true.
hours between shifts because I would be so exhausted.
That's hard work you were doing too. You must have
Yeah.
been pretty toned up.
I'll find a picture. I have a picture of me right after I left, and I was in the best shape I've ever been in my life. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Did you
you
end
need to
up
post that.
getting an apartment nearby?
I did. So for 6 weeks, I drove 100 miles to work and 100 miles home.
Mm.
And they didn't work me 5 days a week. They worked me 6 days a week. And so, yeah, I was after about 4 weeks, I came home. I called all my friends. It was like 11 in the morning, and I was like, I'm gonna lay down for a nap, and we're gonna like tear it up tonight because I had like a 3-day weekend or something. And they're like, awesome. And I laid down on the couch at my mom and dad's house, and I woke up 3 days later, and they were like, you gonna go to work? I was like, what do you
Oops.
mean? They're like, it's Sunday. You have to go to work. And I was like, oh crap. So I'm like,
Yeah.
what day is it? And so as soon as I got off work, I got to work, I got off, I went and went apartment shopping, and like 2 weeks
Mm,
later, I had found a place and moved in. So yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was just minutes from Disneyland. It was on the Anaheim Garden Grove uh, border, so
Oh, nice.
it was really
It's probably
close.
a
So
hotel now.
Yeah, it's probably gone.
it probably well, it was a large like a complex, but it's
Okay.
probably a lot of different things now. And it was a little studio apartment. It cost me $500 a month. I made $900 a month.
Yeah, that's a lot of rent for
It was
yourself for one
yeah.
person.
And I still was driving back to because my parents had a business and one of their suppliers was in was north of me up in like East LA County, almost to Riverside County, and I would drive up and get materials and take it to them like once a week.
Oh,
So I was still making the drive at least once a week, but it was fine, and yeah, it was good times. But yeah,
Living
I
the
did get an
yeah.
dream.
apartment.
You were young.
Yeah.
They didn't want me to leave, and there are times where I think about what it would have been like if I stayed. And there was a lot of possibility, a lot of, one of the things
Oh,
that
sure.
I saw my bosses in Graveyard and I was like, I don't know, I want that job. But there was a lot of other things I could have done. I could have gone into guest services. I could have been a tour guide. I could have been a manager in
Totally.
attractions. I could have gone to
Yeah.
entertainment. I could have done a lot of things at the
Yeah.
Disney company. But I didn't. I left after 1 year.
Yeah. Well, I guess for all of us, we still have the possibility some weird alternate universe that we would have a retirement job there. But none of
Yeah.
us live next to one of those parks, so it would be a
Nope.
whole different life.
Yeah. Yeah, you remember, like I said at the beginning, I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have, a rent. I didn't have an apartment. I was living with my parents. If I find myself in a situation where I got nothing keeping me, I might just move to Orlando and go work driving the bus up and down Main Street. I don't know, but I honestly don't hope for that, but it's not the worst fallback scenario. It's pretty bad. It would have to be pretty bad for that to happen,
Yeah,
but at
Yeah.
least I have that to fall back on if things get so bad that I need to, you know, recalibrate at life.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all can just go visit whenever we want still. So,
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically.
Yes.
So, well, this has been great because this is exactly why we do these chats because we all get to sort of mentally have that experience of, feeling like we're there. So Joey, thanks for sharing your stories. It's
Yeah, it
always
was
fun to hear
great.
this stuff.
Well, thanks for letting me share it again. I enjoyed talking about it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing about y'all's trips in the future so that I can live vicariously through you.
Yeah, we're all helping each other out right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
And
Rick.
yeah, and Rick, thanks. Thank you, Rick. And if you move to Orlando, Rick's there, so
Yeah.
you
Oh,
can
yeah.
visit.
Yeah. We have an instant friend there.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, now that geez, it's 12:41 my time, you guys. Wow. That
Yeah.
was great though. I'm glad we had the time for you to really tell your stories. So thanks
Yeah.
for taking that time.
Yeah. You bet.
All right. So we'll say bye to YouTube for now and we'll let you guys know when be back. But
Yay.
thanks for watching.